This video is going to look at the psychodynamic explanation for gender development. So we're going to be looking at Freud's theories. And for those of you that don't know anything about Freud, you're going to see he's quite controversial in his thinking and his theories. So the specification says you've got to know the psychodynamic explanation, Freud's psychoanalytic theory, so psychosexual theory, the Oedipus complex, the Electra complex, and identification and internalisation. So there's quite a lot of things you can get questioned on. If it's not a main essay, they could ask any of these as a shorter question. So be aware of that. So Freud has a theory about the psychosexual stages of development. You see them in the table at the bottom. So they say children go through the oral, anal, phallic, latency, and genital stages of development. And you can have a little read here about the oral stage is a little young child sucking and biting on things, but everything goes into the mouth in those first 18 months. The anal stage, where they start to get pleasure from pooing and excreting themselves. Phallic stage, everything turns to their genitals, so they start to touch their genitals a lot more. Latency stage, where they start to suppress sexual feelings. And the genital stage, which focuses on masturbation. So you don't need to know all of these stages. The big one for us is this phallic stage. And according to Freud, gender development occurs during the phallic stage. So during 3 to 6 years. So prior to this phallic stage, according to Freud, children have no concept of gender identity at all. And pre-phallic children aren't masculine, they're not feminine, they have no concept of this whatsoever. But during the phallic stage, children's pleasure and pleasure for the child comes from the genitals. And they start to experience what's known as the Oedipus complex if they're a boy, and the Electra complex if they're a girl. So firstly, we're going to go through what the Oedipus complex is. And the Oedipus complex again occurs during the phallic stage of psychosexual development. And this is where boys develop an incestuous feelings towards their mother. They start to lust towards their mother. And they also have a jealous and murderous hatred towards their father, because their father basically stands in the way of them possessing their mother. But eventually, boys start to realise that the father is far more powerful to them. So they start to fear being castrated, so their penis being cut off by their father, because they have such strong feelings towards their mother. And this is called castration anxiety. So children during this phallic stage have incestuous love towards their mother, fear their father, start to realise their father's more powerful than them, and then fear having their penis chopped off, this castration anxiety. And in order to resolve this conflict going on between wanting their mother, being afraid of their father, they give up their love for their mother and they start to identify with their father. And this is that process of identification. They start to see the father as the same as them and identify and imitate, start to copy the father's behaviours. Girls, on the other hand, go through the Electra complex. And this is put forward by Carl Jung, who was a neo-Freudian, so a follower of Freud, a theorist of Freud. It wasn't put forward by Freud himself. Freud said he didn't understand women. And this theory, and this Electra complex itself, comes from Carl Jung. But it still comes under the Freud's overall theory. And again, this occurs during the phallic stage. And this is where girls start to experience something called penis envy. They regret and are envious of boys who have got penises. And they see themselves in competition with their mother for their father's love. So really, they've got this double resentment towards their mother. Firstly, they see the mother as a love rival, standing in the way of them getting with their father. And they also blame the mother for them not having a penis. So they've got this double resentment towards them. But over time, girls start to accept they're never going to have a penis. And they substitute this penis envy with their desire to have children. And this is where that identification with their mother comes in. They start to ignore their penis envy and identify with their mother and have a desire to have children. So two of the key words in your specification, if you remember earlier, were identification and internalisation. We're just going to go through again what these key words mean. So identification is when both children identify with their same-sex parents, and that helps them resolve their issues and their conflict that they're having. So they identify with their same-sex parent to overcome their conflict. Internalisation now is when they adopt the values of that same-sex parent. So they take on the gender identity of that parent. Boys will take on the gender identity and internalise the gender identity of their father. Girls will internalise the gender identity of their mother. Now we're going to have a look at the evaluation points for Freud's theory. Okay, you've already seen it's quite a strange theory, the fact that boys have incestuous feelings towards their mother, girls have penis envy and see their mother as being in the way of the father. Now we're going to look at the evaluation points for Freud's theory. So Freud does have research support, and it's mainly based on a case study of little Hans. And Freud uses this as his evidence for the Oedipus complex. So little Hans was a 5-year-old boy who had a fear of being bitten by a horse. And this all appeared to stem from him seeing a horse collapsing and dying in the street. But Freud interpreted it slightly differently. Freud said the fear of being bitten represented his fear of being castrated by his father. So that fear of being bitten by a horse was all actually his fear of having his penis chopped off by his father. And he transferred that fear of his father onto horses. And he used it as a defense mechanism. He displaced that fear of his father and displaced it onto his fear of horses. However, research doesn't really support the Oedipus complex. Many have criticised the little Hans research. It's only a case study of one individual, and it's Freud's interpretation. So he reported basically what he wanted to. It was subjective. He selected what he reported in order to support his theory. And a major issue with the Oedipus complex is that it's unconscious in nature. It's not something we can test. It's not like the biological approach where you can test genetics, you can test hormone levels. You can't test this theory. And therefore, it's not based on genuine science. We can't prove it to be a correct theory or an incorrect theory through scientific methods. And that really reduces the overall validity of Freud's theory. However, we also get the issue of what about non-nuclear families? So a nuclear family would be, you've got a mum, you've got a dad, you've got the children. And theory relies heavily on having a nuclear family, having two parents of different genders so that their children can manage the Oedipus and Electra complexes effectively. A boy needs to identify with their father. The girl needs to identify and internalise with their mother so they can develop their gender. And Freud said being raised in a non-nuclear family will have adverse effects on gender development. So a non-nuclear family might be, you've got parents who are homosexual, you've got two males who have a daughter. Okay, that would be a non-nuclear family. But Olmok came on to say that, did a load of research and said that children from single parent families went on to develop normally. So a single mother can bring up a boy and they'd go on to have normal gender identity, even though they didn't have to overcome the Oedipus complex and identify and internalise with their father. Okay, so research looking especially at non-nuclear families tends not to support Freud's theories. It's also in disagreement with other theories. Freud said that gender identity is formed by the end of that phallic stage, at the end of 6, and that is it. You develop all your gender identity during that phallic stage, and that there's no further development either before that stage or after that stage. Once the Oedipus or Electra complex is complete, gender development is also complete. And this is in contrast to a lot of the other theories we've already looked at. For example, Kohlberg theory, that gradually developed through their childhood. Okay, this theory, everything happens during that phallic stage, nothing before, nothing after. Finally, like all the other theories we looked at, this is a reductionist theory. It ignores the role of biology, it ignores the role of testosterone, it ignores the masculinization of the brain. So of course you can bring in your usual reductionist paragraph in here as well.